This is part 2 of my video series on mold making and resin casting for miniatures. So right now I've got my mold box and I'm going to try and create my mold how I want it. The point being to reduce the amount of air pockets and to minimize any trapped components between the two layers. In a two-part mold, you want to make sure that you can pry the pieces apart and no part of the miniature is going to be stuck in one mold because the mold rubber is wrapped around a significant part of the body. So choosing where you dissect the miniature in half between the two molds is an important step to ensuring that you get the type of mold that you want. So I've just built up my side of my Lego here, and I've been pushing some plasticine to fill up about a centimeter or so, maybe a centimeter and a half. And the purpose of this is to have something in which to plant the miniatures, so that when we pour the silicone mold rubber over top, it's going to intersect with half of the mold. So you just want to get the plasticine, you want to shove it into all the corners and the sides. So I've already skipped a bunch of it off screen, but that's essentially all you're doing, is pushing in the plasticine. So now what I'm going to use is I'm going to use cut up pieces of sprue as sort of my injection system, because the way that I've found it's easiest for me to ensure that I get a good injection is to actually use these syringes for the liquid resin. And what I'll do is I'll inject it down a piece of sprue, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to position these guys so that it's going to start filling up the sprues from the bottom, and at the top there's going to be air release valves, well, not valves but just pockets, so that as the resin rises it's going to push out any air straight out the top, and it's going to reduce the amount of imperfections and bubbles that will appear, or trapped parts that don't fill in the miniature as we want it to appear. So you want to make sure there's a good amount of gap on the edge so that you're not putting too many things right near the edge. You want some firmness to your mold. But essentially you want to cut out some pieces, line it up. I like to have my miniatures so that their feet or their base comes right to the edge, so that the release of air will go out. The better job you do here, the less touch-ups you'll have to do to your mold after it's created. Once we have the rubber, we can add some more air releases and just try out the mold a few times to make sure our casts turn out the way we want. So right now I'm just going to sort of lay it out how I want it to appear, just as sort of a test. And if you missed the previous video, I'm using a couple miniatures that a friend of mine has sculpted by hand, and he's actually cast them in pewter. So once I've got it more or less laid out how I want it, I'm going to press it into the plastic. It's going to be air release valves, well, not valves but just pockets, so that as the resin rises it's going to push out any air straight out the top, and it's going to reduce the amount of imperfections and bubbles that will appear, or trapped parts that don't fill in the miniature as we want it to appear. So you want to make sure there's a good amount of gap on the edge so that you're not putting too many things right near the edge. Once I've got it more or less laid out how I want it, I'm going to press it into the plasticine to embed it a little bit. The miniature I'm going to embed halfway, and I'm probably going to build up the sides of them as well. So this is a crucial step here, is choosing exactly where you want the miniature to be split in half. Again, you want to choose it so that it reduces the amount of place that can get stuck. So I'm just going to use my finger here and I'm building up the sides. You'll see that under the underside of his head is somewhere I'll want to build up as well. So I'm going to take some extra plasticine and actually build up those spots. Again, pressing it firmly in. This is one of the most important steps if you're going to get a proper cast once the mold is finished. So essentially you're going to do the same thing over here for the weapons as we did for the axe. Okay, so I've got his feet blocked off there. Some sort of notches. This is going to be filled up with mold rubber. And that'll help our molds line up when they're done.